Sometimes life places someone in front of you who feels like they've stepped straight out of your dreams. And yet, for reasons you can't quite understand, you can't be with them. Not now. Maybe not ever. Still, something in you refuses to let go of the feeling. It's as if they've awakened a part of you that had been asleep for years. It's confusing, even frustrating. How can a connection feel so intense, so destined, and still be impossible? The truth is, according to Carl Jung, these encounters are rarely accidents. They are often mirrors, sent by the unconscious or, if you prefer, by the universe itself, to reveal something deep within you that you might not have seen otherwise. We tend to believe that when we feel something powerful towards someone, it must mean they're meant to stay. But what if their role in your life is not to stay, but to open a door? A door to parts of yourself you've forgotten, denied, or never truly met. Think back for a moment. Has anyone ever entered your life and, without touching you physically, they reached something so private, so hidden inside you it felt almost sacred? It's not just attraction, it's recognition. They reflect qualities you crave, wounds you carry, or potential you've never allowed yourself to claim. Jung would call this synchronicity. Those deeply meaningful coincidences that seem to happen outside of logic. The wrong time, the impossible circumstances, yet the undeniable sense that this matters. And maybe it does. Just not in the way you think. Sometimes the universe doesn't send us the one we're meant to love forever. It sends us the one who wakes us up, the one who shakes our patterns, challenges our comfort zone, and pushes us toward the next version of ourselves. They may stir the anima or animus within you, the inner feminine or masculine archetypes Jung believed we all carry. And when those archetypes awaken, it's not always to lead you toward romance. It's often to lead you back to yourself. Before we go deeper, I want you to reflect on something. And if you feel comfortable, I'd love for you to share it in the comments, because your story might resonate with someone who needs to hear it. When you meet someone like this, it can feel like they carry a missing fragment of your own soul. You might not even be able to name it. It's not about their job, their appearance, or even their personality in the conventional sense. It's something subtler, something that bypasses logic entirely and goes straight to the core of who you are. Suddenly, you notice your senses sharpening when they're near. The way their voice rises and falls, the way their presence changes the room's energy. These things imprint themselves on you. Even the silence between you feels charged. You might catch yourself replaying small moments in your mind. The way they listened when you spoke, the glimmer in their eyes when they laughed. And yet, despite all of this intensity, there's a wall. It might be timing. They're with someone else. They live far away. Your lives are moving in different directions. It might be that they've closed certain doors you wish were open. Or it could be that deep down, you know stepping through this connection would unravel parts of your life you're not ready to let go of. This is where Carl Jung's concept of projection comes alive. When you feel a pull towards someone you can't have, it's often because they've become a screen onto which your unconscious is projecting something it wants you to see. You're not just seeing them, you're seeing a reflection of your own inner landscape, one that has been hidden, neglected, or unexplored. Think about the qualities you admire in them. Maybe it's their confidence, their tenderness, their creativity, their unshakable calm. Ask yourself, could these be qualities you've always had, but haven't fully claimed as your own? Jung believed that these encounters happen precisely to wake up what's dormant within us. They remind us of who we are capable of becoming. And this is the paradox. The stronger the projection, the more magnetic the attraction, but also, the more impossible it often feels to bridge the gap. Because the unconscious isn't necessarily interested in building a life with this person, it's interested in showing you what you've left behind in yourself. This can feel almost cruel. You want them, but life says no. And yet, this no might be the very thing that keeps the mirror intact long enough for you to truly see it. If you were to be with them, the projection might dissolve, and you'd be left with an entirely different reality, perhaps one that doesn't carry the same magic. So here's the deeper question. If this person is only the mirror, can you take what you see in them and integrate it into your own life? Could you allow their presence to shape you? even if they never stand beside you? If you've ever felt that impossible mix of longing and recognition, I invite you to share it in the comments. What qualities did they awaken in you? And what would it look like to live those qualities yourself without needing them to hold the mirror? There's a strange tension in these connections, a push and pull that feels both exhilarating and exhausting. On one hand, you feel more alive than you have in years. On the other, there's an ache that refuses to fade, precisely because you can't cross the boundary that separates you. And in that tension, something profound begins to happen. You start to see yourself differently. Carl Jung often said that the people we meet are, in some way, mirrors reflecting the unconscious parts of our psyche. But these unattainable connections have a unique power. They strip away distractions. Because you can't claim this person as yours, you're forced to look beyond the fantasy and into the truth of what they represent. Ask yourself, when you think about them, what stirs the strongest emotion? Is it desire? Is it admiration? Is it the way they make you feel safe, seen, or understood? Each of those feelings is a breadcrumb leading back to something within you. The longing for their presence is often a longing for an inner quality you've lost touch with. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming whole by integrating all aspects of the self. And sometimes, the universe sends a person you cannot have precisely because your soul needs the lesson more than it needs the relationship. Their role is not to complete your love story, but to disrupt the story you've been telling yourself about who you are. Think about timing. You meet them at a moment when life feels predictable, maybe even stagnant. Then, without warning, they appear, and suddenly, your inner world is flooded with color. You're imagining possibilities, questioning your choices, feeling emotions you thought had gone numb. It's not just about them, it's about what's waking up in you. But here's where many people get caught. They confuse the awakening with the awakener. They believe that the person is the source of the feeling, and so they cling, mentally, emotionally, sometimes even physically, hoping that if they can just hold on, the magic will remain. But the truth is, the magic is yours. It lives inside you, and they were simply the spark that lit it. This is why these connections can feel both like a gift and a curse. The gift is the self-awareness, the inspiration, the reminder of your capacity to feel deeply. The curse is the temptation to think you need them to keep feeling this way. The real challenge is to take what they've stirred in you and carry it forward, even if they vanish from your life tomorrow. So let me ask you, and if you feel open, share it below. Have you ever mistaken the spark for the match? Have you ever held on to a person when, in reality, it was the version of yourself they awakened that you truly wanted to keep alive? There's a subtle but powerful shift that happens when you realize the connection isn't about possession, but about revelation. At first, it can feel like loss, the slow acceptance that this person won't be yours in the way your heart imagined. But with time, and with honesty, it can transform into something else entirely: clarity. Jung believed that meaningful encounters often act as catalysts, shaking us out of patterns we've been unconsciously repeating. These impossible connections are particularly potent because they bypass the comfort of the ordinary. They pierce straight through the surface and touch the core of our identity. And in doing so, they force us to confront questions we might have been avoiding for years. What is it about them that breaks the rules you've been living by? Maybe they embody freedom, while you've been living in caution. Maybe they're unapologetically expressive, while you've learned to keep your emotions guarded. Maybe they show you what it looks like to live with depth, passion, and authenticity. And suddenly, the life you've settled for feels too small. This is why the connection can feel so disruptive. It's not just romantic attraction, it's an inner revolution. You begin to see the cracks in the structures you've built, in your relationships, your career, your self-image. And once you've seen them, it's impossible to go back to pretending they're not there. The danger, of course, is to idealize the other person to the point where you forget your own agency. You might find yourself thinking, if only I could be with them, everything would fall into place. But Jung's perspective would suggest the opposite. It's not their presence that will change your life, it's the qualities within yourself that their presence revealed. Sometimes the reason you can't be with them is the very reason their impact is so lasting. Without the distraction of a relationship, You're left to sit with the feelings they've awakened. And in that space you can choose. Will you let those feelings fade as just another what if, or will you use them as fuel to become more of who you are? It takes courage to make that choice. It means taking responsibility for your own growth instead of handing that power to someone else. It means separating the image you've projected onto them from the reality of who they are and who you are without them. So here's my question for you, and I'd love to see your thoughts in the comments. When you think about the one who got away, are you longing for the person or for the version of yourself you became in their presence? That's not a rhetorical question. It's an invitation to look deeper, to see if perhaps the real gift wasn't their love, but your awakening. There's something profoundly human about wanting to hold on to the people who make us feel alive. We mistake their presence for the source of the aliveness itself, but Carl Jung would argue that the feeling doesn't come from them. It comes from you, from the parts of your psyche they helped you access. This is where the concept of the shadow enters the picture. In Jungian psychology, the shadow represents everything within us that we've repressed, denied, or failed to acknowledge. It's not inherently negative, it's simply hidden. Sometimes the person we can't have is the one who inadvertently drags that shadow into the light. Think about it. The way they trigger you, the emotions that surge when you see them, the longing that refuses to fade. All of this is information. Maybe they remind you of a love you lost, a dream you abandoned, or a part of yourself you decided wasn't acceptable. Maybe they awaken a hunger for intimacy that you've buried under self-protection. And this is where the discomfort comes in. Because when someone stirs your shadow, they also stir your resistance. Part of you wants to run toward them, but another part feels fear. Fear of what might change if you allowed that part of yourself to come fully alive. Jung would say that this is not a sign to avoid the feeling, but to explore it. The pull you feel toward them might not be about building a relationship. It might be an invitation to integrate the pieces of yourself that they've made visible. That's the real work. But here's the challenge. Our culture teaches us to look for resolution in relationships. We want the story to have a clean ending. Together or apart, yes or no. The truth is, some connections are meant to remain unresolved in the external world so that they can complete themselves within us. The ending isn't a breakup or a goodbye. It's the moment you absorb the qualities they awakened and make them your own. It's tempting to believe that closure comes from the other person's actions, from them explaining, choosing, or validating you. But the most powerful form of closure is internal, recognizing that what you were chasing in them was actually something you were seeking in yourself all along. So here's a question I'd like you to sit with, and if you feel open, share it in the comments. It might help someone else who's wrestling with the same emotions. When you think about this person, what exactly do you believe they gave you? Was it attention, passion, safety, inspiration? And if so, how could you begin to cultivate those same things in your own life without relying on their presence? Because that's the transformation Jung was pointing to. Not dependence on the awakener, but ownership of the awakening. The moment you begin to take ownership of the awakening, the dynamic with that person changes, whether they're still in your life or not. You stop looking at them as the keeper of something sacred and start recognizing them as the messenger. And once you see them as the messenger, you can start to decode the message. Jung often spoke about symbols and how the psyche communicates in images, dreams, and archetypes rather than in straight lines. This person you can't be with often carries symbolic weight far beyond who they are in everyday life. They might represent freedom, the thrill of risk, the deep intimacy you've been craving, or the courage to live authentically. When they walked into your life, they may have done more than stir emotions. They may have disrupted your internal status quo. You started questioning the path you were on, the roles you've been playing, the compromises you've been making. It's almost as if their presence illuminated the places where you've been asleep at the wheel. And here's the paradox. Without the impossibility of the relationship, you might not have looked that deeply. If being with them had been easy, you might have gotten lost in the comfort of the connection, instead of facing the discomfort of what it was trying to teach you. The no from life is sometimes the very thing that forces us to turn inward and ask, what is this really about? This is why it's so important not to mistake longing for destiny. Longing can be a powerful teacher, but it's not always an invitation to pursue. Sometimes it's an invitation to pause, to feel the ache, to listen to what it's pointing toward. Imagine this for a moment. If you removed their face, their name, and their specific circumstances from the equation, what would remain? What is the essence of the feeling they've stirred in you? Is it excitement? Hope? A sense of being truly seen? That essence is the gift, and it belongs to you. It's not about erasing them from your heart. It's about taking the essence and allowing it to expand in other areas of your life. Maybe that means pursuing a passion you've neglected, speaking your truth more boldly, or letting yourself feel joy without holding back. The point is to embody the qualities they awakened, so the awakening doesn't depend on their presence. So let me ask you, and if this resonates, write it in the comments. What would your life look like if you fully lived out the qualities this person brought to the surface? How would you act, speak, and make decisions if you already owned those traits as part of yourself? Because that's where the real transformation happens. When the reflection in the mirror becomes the reality you live. There's a point in this journey when the longing begins to change shape. At first it's raw, almost unbearable. You think about them constantly, wonder what could have been, replay moments like scenes from a film you can't stop watching. But as time passes, if you allow yourself to reflect instead of simply ache, something softens. The sharp edge of desire gives way to a quieter awareness. Jung would call this the movement from projection to integration. In the beginning, all the qualities you admired in them felt separate from you, like treasures they carried that you could only access through being close to them. But with time, you start to realize that you've been carrying those same treasures within you all along. They were just hidden under years of habit, fear, or self-doubt. And here's the remarkable thing. Once you integrate what they reflected, you stop needing them to validate it. You no longer think, I feel creative when they inspire me, but rather, I am creative, and I can live from that place every day. You no longer believe that they make you brave. You see that bravery is part of your nature, waiting to be used. Of course, this doesn't mean the memory fades completely. People who act as catalysts in our lives leave a mark, sometimes for the rest of our lives. But the way you carry that mark changes. It stops being a wound and becomes a kind of sacred imprint, a reminder of the turning point when you began to wake up to yourself. This is why Jung spoke so often about the individuation process. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about becoming who you've always been, stripped of illusions and reclaimed from the unconscious. And strangely enough, the people we can't have can play a bigger role in that process than the ones we build a life with. They shake us out of autopilot, and in doing so, they give us back to ourselves. You might be wondering, does that mean these connections are purely internal? That they don't matter in the outer world? Not at all. They matter deeply. They are real. But their true value lies not in whether the relationship lasts, but in whether you allow the experience to transform you. And here's where I'd like to invite you to reflect. And if you feel open, share it in the comments so others can learn from your insight. When you look back at someone you couldn't be with, can you name the exact moment you realized it wasn't just about them? Was there a day, a conversation, or even a look that made you understand they were holding up a mirror rather than a promise? Because that moment, the one where longing turns into clarity, is the moment your story shifts from being about them to being about you. There comes a moment when you realize that the connection was never meant to be a destination. It was a doorway. In the beginning, you might have fought against this idea. You told yourself that if circumstances were different, if timing aligned, if just one detail in the universe shifted, everything could work out. But slowly, you begin to understand that the very impossibility of it is part of the design. Jung believed that the psyche has an instinct for growth, and sometimes it uses other people as instruments to guide us toward that growth. That means the impossible nature of the relationship isn't a cruel twist of fate. It's an essential part of the lesson. If you could have had them, the urgency to turn inward might never have been born. Think about it. The yearning you've felt has pushed you to ask questions you might never have considered otherwise. Who am I without them? What do I truly need to feel alive? What parts of me have I neglected for so long that it took someone else's presence to wake them up? These are not comfortable questions, but they are transformative ones. And here's where the real work begins. You start to live as if the qualities they awakened are already yours. If they inspired you to be bolder, you begin taking more risks in your work, in your relationships, in your self-expression. If they reminded you of your capacity for tenderness, you start offering that tenderness to yourself and to the people already in your life. This is the pivot point where longing can either trap you or free you. If you stay focused on them, replaying what-ifs, you remain in the loop of desire and frustration. But if you shift your focus to what the connection gave you, to the internal movement it sparked, you step into freedom. And freedom changes everything. You no longer see them as the one who got away. Instead, you see them as the one who gave you a compass. And that compass, if you follow it, will lead you toward relationships and experiences that match the version of yourself you are becoming. It's not about replacing them. It's about realizing you never lost them, because what they awakened isn't going anywhere. That energy, that inspiration, now lives in you. So, here's what I'd like to ask you. And if it feels right, put it in the comments, because your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If you could speak to that person right now, knowing everything you know now, what would you thank them for? Not for what they gave you directly, but for what they helped you discover about yourself. That's the kind of gratitude that doesn't fade. It turns a fleeting encounter into a lifelong gift. By the time you reach this stage, something inside you has shifted so profoundly that you can look back at the entire connection with new eyes. The ache is still there, but it no longer feels like a wound. It feels like a teacher you didn't expect. One who never sat you down in a classroom, but who changed the way you see yourself forever. Carl Jung spoke about how the unconscious brings us face to face with the exact experiences we need in order to grow, even if those experiences don't fit our ideas of happiness. This is why the universe sometimes sends you someone you can't be with. It's not to punish you, it's to expand you. And when you finally understand this, you stop resisting the reality of what happened. You stop thinking of it as unfinished business and start seeing it as a complete chapter, one whose purpose was never to lead to possession, but to transformation. You realize that their role in your story was symbolic. They were a mirror, a compass, a catalyst. They brought your attention to qualities you had ignored, to dreams you had delayed, to wounds you hadn't dared to face. And now, whether they're still in your life or just a memory, the transformation they sparked belongs entirely to you. This is the essence of individuation, claiming every part of yourself so that you can live as a whole human being. In this sense, the people you can't have often serve your journey toward wholeness more powerfully than those who stay, because they demand nothing from you except honesty with yourself. And perhaps that's the most surprising part. Gratitude begins to replace longing. You find yourself thankful for the timing, even if it was inconvenient. Thankful for the impossibility, even if it hurt. Because without those exact circumstances, the lesson might never have been as deep, as clear, or as permanent. Sometimes you even begin to understand that the love you thought was for them was actually for life itself, for the experience of being cracked open, for the reminder that you can still feel this much, for the way it shook you awake. I want to ask you something now, because your insight could help someone who's still in the middle of their own awakening. If you could send a message to your past self, back when the longing was fresh and the pain was sharp, what would you say? Would you tell yourself to hold on, to let go, to listen to the lesson beneath the desire? Share it if you feel called to. Because sometimes we only understand the meaning of these connections when we hear our own truth reflected back to us through someone else's story. And your story might be the reflection someone else is looking for right now. There's a quiet moment that comes after the storm. After the questions, the longing, the ache. It's the moment you realize you can think of them without the sharp pull in your chest. The love is still there, but it has changed form. It no longer clings or demands, it simply exists, like a candle that burns steadily without needing to be seen. Carl Jung once said, "We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life." Perhaps this person was one of those disguises, not your destination, but a reflection of your own depth, your own capacity to feel, to grow, to awaken. When you look back now, you might notice that the details of their face are fading in your memory, but the qualities they awakened remain sharp and alive. The courage you've found, the clarity you've claimed, the way you listen to yourself now, these are not temporary souvenirs. They are part of you. And here is where gratitude takes root in its purest form. Gratitude not just for them, but for the way life uses people and moments to bring us home to ourselves. Gratitude for the pain that pushed you to grow. Gratitude for the impossible connection that, by being impossible, became unforgettable. You begin to understand that closure was never about getting answers from them. It was about giving answers to yourself. About saying, yes, this mattered, even without the traditional ending our culture tells us love stories should have. And perhaps most importantly, you realize that you are no longer waiting, not for them. Not for anyone to awaken you again, because the person you were waiting for has been with you all along. If anything you've heard here resonates, I'd like to invite you to share your experience in the comments. Not because the internet needs another story, but because someone out there might read your words at exactly the moment they need them. Your journey, your pain, your insight, they could be the mirror for someone else's awakening. And if this conversation has brought you value, if it's given you something to carry forward in your own life, I'd be honored if you stayed connected. You can subscribe, you can share this with someone you think might need it, or you can simply come back when you need a reminder that the things we can't have often give us more than the things we do. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for giving your attention to something deeper than the surface. Whether we've met before or this is your first time with me, know that your presence matters, because in the end, the universe sends us all kinds of messengers. And maybe right now, the message you needed to hear is this: you are already whole.